I wanted to do a little impromptu live stream today to talk about developer careers. Really a pretty broad topic, but anything from hiring to growing in your career, getting promoted, everything that goes into that, and have an opportunity just to chat about it and see what questions you have. So to start this off, what I want to do is give a little background on myself, because I think you can really only understand this from the context of your own experiences and what you've lived through or you've worked through yourself. So I'll talk a little bit about how I started to code, what my career has looked like, the places I've worked, the experiences that I've had. And then at the end, I'll make sure that we have plenty of time to answer anyone's questions about hiring, growing, or getting promoted inside of your career. So, hey, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Joining in live. So getting started coding, I actually didn't know what I wanted to do when I was graduating high school. I was between doing music, doing graphic design, and doing something with computers. I liked computers, but I didn't really know where it was going to take me. And I decided, okay, it seems like I'm going to have a better chance of getting a job if I end up doing something with computers. So I basically went to college or university without knowing anything about programming, just kind of winging it. And I had a pretty quick reality check when I realized that a lot of the people there were much further along than I was and a lot more advanced in their programming. So I struggled a little bit there to get up to speed, eventually managed to get an internship. So if you are in school or you are doing the self-taught route, trying to get an internship or a part-time job or getting your foot in the door somewhere can be super, super beneficial. And I'll go into this a little bit more, but my first internship, I was using C# and I was doing a lot of automated testing. So this was really the first time that I was exposed to agile teams, the Scrum methodology, and it really helped me understand the value of writing tests and, production level applications and all the work that goes into that, what an actual software job looks like. And getting this hands-on experience helped me understand, oh, this is the practical application of what I'm doing, at school or what I'm learning on my own if you're self-taught. So that was super, super helpful for me. Eventually, I figured things out in school and I had a second internship, a summer internship, where I was using C++ and I was using Qt, which is like a GUI or a graphical interface for like building these desktop apps with C++. I worked at an aerospace company, which was pretty cool. I love SpaceX. So it was cool to be involved in that field. But again, it was still a pretty traditional company as far as software goes and developers goes. So, it's a completely different workflow when from the top down, a company understands that software development life cycle, and they just kind of get how software is made, if that makes sense. So after that, I had a better understanding of what I was looking for in my career and how I could grow in my career and become a better developer. I had my third and final internship before I graduated college or university, and this was at a SaaS company, so a proper software company in the finance field. And it was a completely different culture and environment because they deeply understood from the top down what it was like to build quality software. And this changes everything. It gave me a whole new appreciation for being a developer and wanting to build software, really. This is where I got started using React. We were using Python and Flask on the back end. So I got a lot of exposure there, building web apps. This is really where I started to fall in love with the front end, with CSS, with JavaScript, and realized that I wanted to spend more time doing things on the front end. That transitioned into my full-time job outside of college. I worked there for a while. And then after, I think, 3 years there, I moved to a really large e-commerce company, a grocery company that was going through kind of this digital or modern transformation. And this was an interesting thing to be a part of, as a developer in your career, because you're getting to see like worlds collide, basically. You have the old school way of doing things, which I'm sure many of you watching this have worked at or are currently working at a company that's doing some kind of transformation to hire more developers or put more sites online. And you have the people who are trying to understand the software side of things. And then you have your developers who are like, here's what we need to do. Like, this is the way that things are built. So you learn how to navigate those waters a little bit better. And that's how I've learned a little bit on some of the advice I'll share for kind of growing and getting promoted throughout my career. So I started there on a front end team. I still had a lot to learn about the full stack, but luckily getting thrown into that environment, I grew pretty quickly by being able to work in these hands-on projects, which I would highly recommend stepping outside of your comfort zone and trying to dive into a project that maybe seems just a little more difficult than what you would think. Quickly before I keep going, thank you to everybody who's tuning in right now. Feel free to leave any comments in the chat about developer careers, hiring, growing, and I'm going to swing back and answer some of these. I'm just talking a little bit about my career so that you can understand where I come from. So I was working there. I helped build a component library with JavaScript, adopt that throughout the company, helped adopt Next.js, and a few other things. Eventually started, I was a tech lead there and helped lead one of our e-commerce teams. So I was there for 2 years, and then about 8 months ago now, I think, I started at Vercel, who is the creator of Next.js, which most of my content is on Next.js if you've been following my channel. And I started out at Vercel doing solutions architect work, so on the pre-sales side of things. So essentially helping people understand what is serverless, what is React, what is Next.js, and why are these things helpful for my company and my business? How are they going to help us, make a transformation or change how we do things? And I'm still doing that, but I'm also leading DevRel for Next.js and trying to help grow the developer community. And if you have any thoughts on that, always feel free to DM me on Twitter too. So that's the abridged, 5-minute version of my career to give you an understanding of where I am today. I'm about to turn 28. I live in Iowa in the Midwest in the United States. And really, there's 3 things I want to talk about today. Growing in your career, getting promotions, and then like the hiring process in general, like interviews, or, if you get to a point in your career where you're also helping hire other people, it's also a really important skill to have too. So, hey to everyone in the chat, I'm doing well. Thank you for joining. And we'll talk maybe a little bit about React and Preact at the end as well too, if we have a little extra time. So first on growing in your career, because I'm sure that's why most of you are tuning in who are curious about this. You're at your career at some point and you want to take it to that next level. The number one piece of advice that I can give that has really transformed my career and helped me move more quickly through the ranks, I guess, and really just better understand knowledge too, is learning to write and communicate clearly. And I know that might seem like kind of obvious, or, oh, that doesn't seem like that crazy of an idea. But the best engineers are also great writers. They're great communicators, because if you can, craft this incredible code base, but you can't explain what it does, especially in a asynchronous remote team, you're not going to get very far. And even when it comes to documentation or making formal requirements for how your application should work, whether those are like RFCs or technical documents, being able to write clearly is such an essential skill. I would highly recommend to start trying to focus on this more to grow your career. Tied to this is writing down and documenting your work. So a lot of people I talk to, they work in their role and everything they do stays within the bounds of their job. So they leave their 9 to 5 and nobody hears about it. They don't ever talk to the world about, here's the cool things that I built, or here's the cool things that I worked on. Let me share some of this knowledge that I'm learning on the job. Because the reality is, as a developer, you're constantly learning new things. It's part of why you were hired. So you want to take that knowledge and use it to your advantage. How can I use that knowledge to help level up my career, essentially? So by writing well and documenting and showing the things that you've built or done at work, you want to become a Googleable entity. So you want to make sure that if somebody wants to look up something about Lee, they can find it and they can understand the impact that I've had at my job. So growing is really, really important. A lot of when you grow ties into ideally, hopefully getting a promotion. So this process This process is very different depending on the size of your company. It might be pretty informal, it might be very informal, but the number one thing here is tracking and quantifying your work. So when you get to this process and you say, "Hi, Mr. or Mrs. Manager, I would like to be promoted to a senior engineer or the next level of engineering." If you can't quantify or track the accomplishments or the impact on the underlying business that you've had, it makes it difficult to make that case to, I deserve to be paid more money. So you really want to think as you're working through the day to day, write down these big accomplishments, write down how they affected, growth or business or conversion metrics. Like find these numbers that say, it's almost like sometimes I think about it like, what would I write on my resume when I'm, building some feature? I launch some feature. I say, oh, I helped optimize e-commerce checkout conversions by 12%. Or, you know what I mean? Like something like that. These metrics help you go to management and say, you know what? I did a kick-ass job and I deserve to get paid more money. So definitely track your work, make this argument for yourself, and make your work visible to the company. If you work in a silo and nobody knows that you're doing all this incredible work, then it's harder for them to recognize that and give you the praise and the money that you deserve. So try to make your work visible, which also ties into writing clearly and communicating clearly. It's a very, very key thing here. And there's some questions related to this too. Does writing things down only in Notion count? I mean, Notion is a great tool. We use it at Vercel for all of our internal documentation. So yeah, I would say it absolutely counts. Making sure that you actually circulate or show others that documentation is good too. But really repetition matters a lot with quality writing. Trying to, mash out a first draft, get all your thoughts on paper, and then revise and edit and slim it down to the most important point. I think probably the most famous company that does a really heavy overemphasis on written documentation or written communication is Amazon. I'm sure you can Google this and read a lot more about it, but they have a strong culture focused more on, send me over a 1-page document on that, or send me over a X number of pages document on that. And yeah, really great engineers are the great salesperson of their ideas. So they are able to take, hey, I want to, build this thing, and I have to internally advocate that or take that to the rest of the company. So how would I measure growth as a developer other than a role label or the company name? I think it's easy to fall into this trap where you measure yourself based on the company that you're working at. And I'm not going to lie, there is obviously an advantage to working at the Facebook, Amazon, Googles of the world because they have that name recognition. But I really like Jonathan's point here is, regardless of the company that you work at, you want to try to measure that growth such that you can prove that you've had an impact. So in the past, for example, I've used, tangible metrics like checkout conversion rates or increasing developer productivity. When I was doing the component library that I rolled out at a company before, I surveyed everybody who used the component library. I said, how satisfied are you? How unsatisfied are you? And I did it before and after. And I had tangible metrics that said, because we rolled out this component library, engineers were 80% more effective. So then, a manager sees that and they're like, you know what? You did a great job. They have that statistical point. Yeah. Do you think companies starting to employ remote devs makes it good for the industry? Will the growing competition make working in software industry less desirable? So I think remote developers is an excellent thing. It really opens up the possibilities for who you can hire, who you can work with, and who you can collaborate with. I think it will help introduce competition, absolutely, because you have, people all over the world who are able to, well, depending on the time zones, I guess, or who are able to contribute or potentially have a job. But in the long run, I see this as a good thing because as more of the world turns online and more of our jobs become online in our communication and how we work, I do think this is the future of work. I think there's going to be a mixture for sure. Like there's definitely people who don't like the all remote thing, especially after COVID and being locked inside, like I know a lot of people are ready to get back in the office as well too. So I'm sure there's a merger of that in the future, in some way. But I do think in a maybe a short or a medium amount, like remote work is probably here to stay for the future. Hey, thanks for joining. And this is a tough one too. Sometimes we can get stuck trying to feel like we need to get the code done instead of the documentation. And when I say documentation in this regard, I'm not necessarily saying like how to help others like run the code or navigate through the code base. That is good, but almost selfishly, the documentation piece of this and what I'm saying with growing your career is what is the actual impact of my changes? So being able to, before you code, clearly document or explain the reasoning behind what you're trying to do, whether you're trying to influence somebody or help them explain why you're making the changes you're making. But then afterwards, actually showing the impact of those changes, because that's where you really get to quantify what you're doing as a dev. Like when you have you can't say, oh, I made 2,000 lines of changes in this pull request, because I think everybody knows at its core that that metric of like lines of code changed doesn't really make a lot of sense, because you could commit a like yarn lock file. Like you don't know exactly what that is. I like the front end and the back end, and in between, how do I choose which side to pick for my next job? Honestly, do whatever inspires you and makes you happy to come to work, because whatever you enjoy working on the most is when you're not going to get burnout, or you're not going to feel like you're not going to feel like you need to switch jobs, or like you want to quit the software industry and become like a woodworker or something, like a craftsman. I don't know. So yeah, front end or back end, honestly, like it really comes down to personal preference, I would say. How much do you get paid? Doesn't have to be exact. I'm myself a software developer at IBM, but I would like to know how things are at Vercel. Very bold. I'm not going to say my salary on my live stream, but I get paid well. I get compensated well for what I do. I think in general, startups pay less than major companies that have, they have more funding because they're publicly traded. They might have guaranteed stock options. Right now I have the basically the lottery ticket stock options. Like maybe it will happen, maybe it won't. Hopefully it does. Like I'm confident that Vercel is going to do well, but yeah, it's a gamble. When you work at the IBMs or the Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Google, Netflix, whatever, you get a higher base salary and a higher compensation, usually total compensation, because you're getting all these stock options. So thank you. Hey, Ryan, thanks for joining. You use Glassdoor. Honestly, Glassdoor is, I found that it's getting less and less useful over time. There is a website, I think it's like levels.fyi, which has pretty accurate numbers for the top tier software companies. So not necessarily like all of the ones that might be in your area, but for some of the larger ones, you can use those as a reference. I think in general, like you can probably get paid more than you realize. I think it's easy to see the salaries of people who work at the Amazon, Facebook, Google, whatever, like the large companies, and be like, wow, they make a ridiculous amount of money. There's no way that I can make that. I mean, they make more money than me, but I think in general, what you realize is as developers, when we quantify our impact, we can make a lot of money. So it's a good thing to know that there is a very high ceiling to our industry, which I think is good. How much do you get paid? Savage. Hey, thank you for joining. How do I approach new tools that come out? I feel kind of overwhelmed as a full stack developer, and then you get this fear of missing out feeling. So one of the hardest things, it's a blessing and a curse with being a developer, because all these new things come out, and when you're tuned into the like the zeitgeist, the Twitter world, and you see all these new things, you're like, oh my gosh, like I have to adopt this thing right now, or I have to use this thing right now because it seems like the new hot thing. The reality is there's a lot of hype behind things like that. You don't necessarily have to learn it, but in general, you are correct. Like the software industry moves pretty quickly, and it's like almost like 5-year cycles where things can change pretty drastically in 5-year cycles. I mean, React's like 7 years old or something now. So it's really not that old. And then, before that, you're doing mostly like PHP stuff. So constantly learning on the job is a important part of being a developer. So you have to learn to balance that appetite for learning with also not stressing yourself out and getting FOMO and feeling like you need to learn every new thing you get. Be really focused and make intentional learning choices based on where you want to take your career and what tools not only like look cool, but what tools will actually help you get a job. Hopefully that helps. Let's see. Hopefully I answered that for you as well. How do you think you get a good opportunity without a lot of experience? For example, I have a lot of good eyes on me in Brazil, but I'm trying to get out of here is tough. So number one, I talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but you want to make your presence known online somewhere. And I like to be really tactical when I say this, which is you don't have to, code for 50 hours a week outside of your job. Or if you don't have a job, you don't have to like code for the rest of your life. I don't like the notion that people have to code outside of their job or they like have to love it. It's great if you do. Absolutely. Like that's amazing. If you don't, that's also totally okay. What you need to do is when you're at your job or when you're preparing for your job, whatever you're building, whatever you're writing, whatever you're shipping, document it, make it public, and make it so that people can find you, because then you're building this vehicle for people to reach out to you and to find you and send you job opportunities. So it might be something as simple as I was trying to build this React application and I hit this error. Nobody had shown a really easy way of how to use React to print off a page. This literally happened to me. I was like, okay, I can't figure this out. So I wrote an article, it was like how to print in React, because I wanted to like print off a separate page when I clicked on a button that wasn't the current page. And it, like thousands of people have looked at it. And maybe one of those people is trying to hire somebody who's good at React. And I just created that opportunity for me on the internet somewhere that somebody can find on Google when they type in, how to print with React. They're like, oh, this guy seems like he knows what he's doing. Maybe I don't. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing. But putting that out there at least helps you get your foot in the door a little bit as well. Hey, I'm a 15-year-old developer who's been learning and building for the past 3 years. Congratulations, you're way ahead of me, so you can do amazing things. I want to build up some experience over the summer as I get a part-time job or internship. Absolutely, part-time job or internship will help out so much. Tough to find advice for teens before you get into your later 20s. I would say you're doing all the right stuff. You're doing all the right stuff, getting involved, trying to get that practical experience and get something on your resume or get that real world experience. So keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job. How do you prepare for interviews at these big companies? I hate that I am measured with how well I know data structures and algorithms for my damn React job. Amen. Amen. So I had a note to talk about this on hiring. I have been only briefly involved in hiring people myself. Like on the other side, the majority of my time with hiring is actually doing a lot of interviews. The most of them I've probably failed, technical interviews. I mean, I've had some good ones for sure, but I've also failed a lot of them because let's be honest, they're really hard. I mean, you have no idea what random question this person is going to come in and quiz you on that you may or may not know, and maybe some random thing that you haven't studied. There's thankfully like lots of good resources out there now for if I want to go to Facebook, like here's a good idea of like maybe what they're trying to do or XYZ company. But yeah, it's tough because depending on the role, you might need to use some of those things if you're back-end engineer. But yeah, for front-end roles, I would really like to see the interviewing practices get updated a little bit to where they're more practical, like real-world, build your own React style things. Some companies are doing this. Shout out to the companies who are doing this. But yeah, it can be frustrating a little. Thank you so much. React in 6 years' time will be what jQuery is now. You know what? I am long on React. I think that it is fundamentally changing how we build the web. Maybe I'll be wrong. I don't know. But at least for right now, I think that it's doing a lot of good things that will make it relevant for a long time. Let's see. A lot of times I see things in the tech community. I think I have this feeling that I have a lot to learn. How do I combat this? hopefully it will make you feel better knowing that everyone else out there, including myself, I see these same things and I think, wow, there is a ton of stuff that I don't know. I just put out a video on Docker with Next.js, and I am so novice with Docker. I know the absolute basics of how to like build my image and run it, but like there is a whole world of DevOps and a whole world of Kubernetes and containers and all this stuff and networking that like I don't really know anything about. And I've seen folks at previous jobs who are really into that stuff and they know the details, and it's just like there's so much there. It's crazy. So try not to get overwhelmed by the fact that people like there's a lot to learn, but find comfort in knowing that you can specialize and you can figure out the area of expertise that you want to double down on. For me, I've kind of doubled down on the front end. I love the front end. I have the most experience in the front end. I like React. I like Next.js. I like building visual websites. So I've kind of doubled down there. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thanks for joining. Do I think the front end is hype now? Because it seems like new programmers want to be a front end developer. I work as a full stack more than 12 years, and I see many hyped stacks die. I would say, I'm not sure that I would say the front end is too hyped, but I agree with the sentiment that for people who've been in programming for a long time, you've been programming longer than myself, who do full stack and they've seen the transition from jQuery to PHP, or all these different tools, to more JavaScript, client-side apps, to server-rendered apps, or wherever we're at right now. I think why we're seeing more front-end developers in 2021 and beyond is because increasingly we're seeing a lot of startups and we're seeing a lot of companies provide solutions that commoditize the back end. So at a certain scale, you're probably always going to have your own database and your own backend and your own systems, your own meshed GraphQL API or something crazy. But for a lot of, let's say, small to medium-sized companies, these in-a-box solutions or these commoditized solutions make it super easy to stitch together things. So in this API economy of systems, if I need payments, I just pull Stripe. If I need to do authentication, I can just pull Auth0 or some other solution, and I can pull all these APIs and these pieces to build my product. And the crazy thing about why front-end developers are so popular right now is like, if your application isn't usable and it's not beautiful, people aren't going to use it. So you have to have the person on the front end, and that's why design is more popular than ever too now. You have to have that person on the front end who really cares about the experience and stitches all that stuff together, because the reality is building websites is actually really hard. There's so many little nuances to building a large website, understanding cross-browser stuff, understanding all the different ways of building things on the web. So yeah, it's tricky. I don't think it's overhyped, but it's a great time to be a front-end developer for sure. But at the same too, with every front-end developer comes somebody who has to understand the back end too. Like you can't have that in a silo. Somebody's going to have to build the API. Even all these commoditized solutions, somebody's managing that database. Somebody's doing the DevOps for that. So I more see it as like a holistic growth of the entire industry. I talked a little about this earlier. If you scroll back on the recording, what are some tips you have for creating a portfolio website that you can show to employers or potential clients? So I would highly recommend doing this. Like I said, you don't have to code outside work to do this like all the time. You can spin up a portfolio website with like a Squarespace or some website where you can drag and drop. Also, you don't look like less of an engineer if you have a Squarespace or a Wix, or like it doesn't make you less of an engineer because you didn't like craft it yourself. The reality is maybe you have kids running around. You got 4 kids running around. You don't have time to do that. So you want to have a portfolio, but you're not going to build it yourself, and you're busy at work as it is. So don't feel bad about doing that. The important thing here is that you are putting this content out, showing that you're a good engineer. You know what you're doing. So maybe that's writing blog posts about, hey, I worked at company A and I helped them modernize their front end or their back end by doing XYZ. Like, people want to read that. People want to hear about these stories of the real things that you've done. So start writing, start putting your stuff online, and I think it will help out a lot. How did I get the job at Vercel, and how was your interview process? Seems like an awesome job. It is a great job. It's kind of a funny story how I got the job. I had reached out in February of 2020. So about a little over a year ago, and I reached out for a different role at the company. And I had talked to Kevin, who's my boss now. He's the CRO. And we've been like, oh yeah, like this seems like it could be possible, but like I wasn't really ready to leave my company yet. And they were like, oh, we're not sure if we're like trying to hire for this right now or not. So we're like, okay, whatever. So we kind of just like didn't talk for a while. And then it was like 5 or 6 months later, I kind of got to a point where I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to make a transition, change up jobs, talk to Kevin. And it actually just worked really well where he was like, hey, coincidentally, we're trying to hire a solution architect to help out with the pre-sales side. I know that you understand the Next.js side. I know that you're a Vercel user and that you deeply, care about this community. You care about helping educate others. It seems like it'd be a good fit. And yeah, it's been a really great fit. The interview process was pretty casual and pretty well structured at the same time. Had a series of interviews with people I'd be working with. Kevin, who would be my boss, Guillermo, who's the CEO. And, we just talked about what I'm good at, what I can bring to the table for Vercel, what they're good at, what they can bring to the table for me. And ultimately, it was a pretty good match. The code I wrote last week is already legacy code. Story of my life. I try to hire people who create solutions to the problems I face. Absolutely. What other areas apart from coding do you normally follow? If you were to read about other things within the development world, what would it be? Great question. I love reading about tech in general. It doesn't always necessarily have to be about coding, but I get intrigued by, even like the tangentially related stuff. Like I love design. I'm not great at it, but I love to read about, if it's like a blog by Figma or some of the design tools, or like understanding the spacing of different typography, or like reading about how the font inter was created, like things like that. I'm just like, oh, this is so cool. It's so out of my normal realm of my domain expertise or whatever. So when you read content from other experts in the field, it's like, oh, this is really interesting. Like they really know their stuff. So yeah, I try to dip into, I occasionally read about like finance or stocks. I don't know a lot about it. Maybe I'll read about like networking, or, more of the heavy details on backend stuff. Like we migrated over to microservices and XYZ, and I learn more about that type of thing. Does a front-end developer need to be well-versed in design or just focus on writing JavaScript? This is a question that is entirely dependent on the company that you work at. I will say that for a lot of JavaScript developers, you don't really need to know a lot about design as far as making it look polished, because you might work at a company large enough to where they provide you the design resources to build something according to a mock-up or a design. That's typically for larger companies. For smaller companies, you usually have a lot more say in the design. You can shape that process. For startups, they're like, you know what, if you could design it too, that would be great. So I would say the further down the company size scale you get, the more involved in the design process gets. But I would recommend learning about design if you can, because it's really a superpower for a front-end developer to be able to design and code, because those two tools, design, code, stitched together with all these different APIs, you can build whatever you want, and you can make it usable, you can make it beautiful. And yeah, learning how to design at least just a little bit has really helped me out. Shout out to Refactoring UI, which is a great resource for that. When do I think that someone can become a team lead? I would say this is dependent on the individual. So there's also a difference between growing into a team lead and growing into a tech lead. So when I think of a team lead, it might be somebody who's actually managing people and they're reporting directly to them. They're handling one-on-ones and making sure that they're satisfied and growing in their careers as well. A tech lead, it's more of like the technical product management for that specific team or product. So they're helping essentially unblock all of the other engineers and guide them to make sure that things get completed. So I typically, from what I've seen, people grow into a tech leadership role after they have kind of had a proven path of delivering as a product engineer or as somebody on the ground who is building these products. And they've also shown an interest in, good communication, absolutely key, good written communication as well too, and helping lead others and inspire others to care about what you're doing. And the best tech leads make you understand the why. Why the hell are we building this thing? Why is it important? And why should I care about it? Because if you don't care, you're like, ugh, just got to pull up Jira and do another ticket today. Like, this is going to suck. So it's great tech leads make you feel like you're a part of the process. You're all working on like one shared goal together. How much of my time in my day job at Vercel is creating content? It's starting to become a larger part of my job now. On the DevRel side, helping manage Next.js. There's lots of questions out there on Twitter or GitHub or Stack Overflow or across the internet that I'm trying to help people out with. And then also creating content around Next.js or other JavaScript, web performance, React to help educate and inspire developers. So a decent amount of time. Hey, thanks for joining. If there's one aspect of my job that I could change, what would it be? I wish we were public so that I had real stock instead of, lottery ticket stock. That would be cool. With the tools we have nowadays, us as front-end developers can build full stack apps. How do you see the future of backend development? I think that for large companies, back-end work is going to continue to grow and thrive. You're always going to need these, intricate solutions that manage companies of 100 plus engineers, right? It's super contextual based on the actual problem that you're trying to solve. But for smaller companies, I think there's a huge opportunity for entrepreneurial folks who want to build companies or APIs that simplify the process of somebody going from idea to product. So that's kind of where I see that. What's my opinion on broadening to other stacks versus deepening in one area? I would say if you're interested in learning, start out with a broad strokes of knowledge. Learn as much as you can. Just really soak it all up in. And then as you progress in your career, start to specialize ideally in one type of thing. The reason why I recommend that is because you get paid more if you specialize. And I work my job so that I get paid. So that's important to me. How do I manage time between work, learning new things, and working on side projects? I try to, my calendar is my single source of truth. I try to make sure that I use that well to manage my time and keep things within the bounds of work and keep things within the bounds of doing things on my own for fun and, making sure I have time with family, friends, wife, etc. So what else we got here? Can I create a Reddit or Discord channel for your followers to help share experiences with tutorials? I would say find me on the Next.js Discord. That's really the only Discord that I use super actively. I also have one for one of my old courses that a few folks hang out in. So shout out to those folks if you're there. And I changed the vinyl, Lindsay. I changed it. It's no longer the brand new one. I've been switching it up every now and then. Is a bachelor's degree good enough to get a nice job? Absolutely. You don't even need a degree. A lot of people can get jobs without a degree. They can go to a boot camp. They can be self-taught. That's not to say that a bachelor's degree doesn't help. It does help, but it's not the only way. There's many paths to becoming a developer. You'll stick with backend then. All right. Is team lead, team manager? I would say probably. It really depends. Some companies might treat a team lead like a product manager too, and not a people manager. So yeah. Yeah. Yes, the tech lead guy who is on the YouTubes. I have seen some of his videos before. Hey, thanks for joining. What do I think of Chakra UI to get a job? Our company is demanding. A lot of people are using it. I think it's a really nice tool. It helps you build quality, well-designed, accessible applications without having to do a lot of the work yourself. So I would recommend it. Thanks for joining. Is freelance experience good to put on your resume? Yes, absolutely. I have some on my resume from a freelance client I did called Beyond HQ, which they're a startup that was helping essentially helping companies open their second office. So they have a headquarters and now they want to open up another office. I helped them out with some website stuff and I had it on my resume for, I think it's still on there. Yeah, I think it's still on there. Learn to love what you do. That is amazing advice. Absolutely. Yeah. So you're going to see these people on Twitter who say that they make, $500,000 a year at Netflix. And honestly, they probably do. There's a lot of people who make just a ridiculous amount of money because they're very specialized. They work at these companies that, are publicly traded. And Netflix in general pays their engineers a lot more than other companies. But you have to also remember that this is not the majority of folks. So there is upside. There's a lot of high upside and potential to get to that level, but it shouldn't be expected or don't psych yourself out basically when you see those type of things. I like to think of it as an aspirational thing. Like $500,000, that's a lot of money. Like most people really don't need that much money anyway. So it's great to know that that's possible, but you also have to have a semblance of work-life balance as well too. Is there something I'm working on for Vercel right now? Yes, you'll know more soon. Do I play the guitar? Yes, I do. Maybe one of these times I'll do a stream where I'm like actually playing music. I have a keyboard back here too that I use sometimes. Do I think a diverse engineering team is important when it comes to apply for a job? Yes, I do. And especially when you're on the application side and you're trying to figure out, is this an environment that I want to be involved with? You ideally want to be in an environment where you're going to feel safe and you're going to feel empowered to do your best work. And a lot of times for folks, that means that they want to go to a diverse team or they want to work with people who have different worldviews than them. So whatever your definition of that is, people from different backgrounds and different experiences, having a combination of those things, I think in general, this is my opinion, I think that helps make not only a better product and a better experience, because you consider people across the world. I know we've probably all seen those, like the tweets or images where, somebody forgot about this complete segment of people that exist in the world and it wasn't built into a product, or they trained some like machine learning algorithm and they forgot about another section of people in the world. So having diverse teams can help prevent that from happening, especially when you're addressing a global market. You can point it out and say, hey, I made that. Absolutely. Could I describe what a solutions engineer architect does? Yeah, so GU are really involved in, and this is interesting too, because I didn't really know that this role existed when I was getting started in software engineering in general. There are so many different things that you can do in tech when you have technical skills, let's say it. So you don't even need to necessarily know how to code, but just understand how software works. I'll define that as technical. There's so many things you can do. You can be in coding, design, product management. You can lead other people. You can, work with sales, which is what this is, or there's so many different things you can do. So that's why I'm really excited about the future of tech and just the future of software in general. People like solutions architects, it's a really interesting job because you do a little bit of a merger of working with customers and working with people on the pre-sale side to understand what they actually need. What do they care about? What are they trying to do? How can we help them improve their business or improve their product? And then you say, okay, well, here's the solutions that we offer. Maybe this is a good fit. Maybe this isn't a good fit. Let's understand your technical requirements. And then we help you, get to something where ideally we're both happy and we can agree on. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Yes, you are watching this live and now you're on screen. I don't know a lot of good books on programming, to be honest. Most of the content I read it online, on blogs, on various outlets. I haven't really read a lot of formal programming books. There's a guy, it's like the Everyday Guide to React, or the Opinionated Guide to React. I think her name is Sarah. I really liked that book, so check that one out. Mention a couple of my soft skills. Number one soft skill, if you want to work on anything, communication. Everything in developer jobs revolves around communication. If you communicate better, you can make more money, you can work better with your teammates. you can just basically do everything better. And that's both verbal, oral, or written communication as well. So if you want to invest in something, I mean, improving like spoken communication is like more vague. It's not as actionable when I say that, but improving written communication, there's lots of things you can do. You can just practice, practice, practice. You can try to make your content, more concise. You can get peer review from folks who say, hey, you should rewrite this thing differently. There's like a whole section of Stack Exchange for like reviewing people's writing as well too. So would recommend that. Hello from Ethiopia. Hi. Thanks for joining. Do I think over the next 10 years, front end will grow more than back end? Maybe. I don't know. I feel like I'd be lying if I said that I knew the answer to that, because I don't know. What do you think of learning C# and .NET when you're looking for front end roles? I've seen a lot of jobs who like to know C#. There's so many companies who are still using C#. I think you see a lot of people who are using React and JavaScript, which there are a ton of people, but there's always going to be a segment of companies who are like one technology generation behind. So like insurance companies in general, they're usually like one technology step behind, maybe two. Like they could be pretty far back. It depends on how modern they are. I know that in the Des Moines area where I live, there's a few large insurance companies that have more outdated tech stacks, and they hire a ton of C# .NET developers. Like there's actually specific areas of the United States that I know about where it's like, oh, like all the .NET developers are like really in demand there. Whoops. How do I negotiate salary when you get an offer? I can give some basic ideas that have worked for me. I'm definitely not an expert on this, but I've had to do it a couple times. The number one thing I think is ideally you don't want to be the first person to say the number. Like ideally you want to see, what do they think that I am worth for the value that I provide to the company, which is hard. Like you can get into a stalemate where they're like, all right, but like really though, like how much are you going to pay me? So if ideally you can get the company to throw out a number first, and it's helpful to remember that there's always room to negotiate. No matter what, even if they say, this is all we can do on the base salary. There's a lot of things that are included in a offer, in a job offer, especially in the US where insurance and benefits is just ridiculous. There's a lot of things that you can, negotiate for there. For some of the larger companies, you have things like stock options, you have things like signing bonuses, all these things that make up what we call your total compensation. So if you can't pull one lever, try to pull another lever because there's more negotiation than you would think. And what you have to recognize is as you get to the end of the hiring process, this company has invested a lot of time in you. They've spent a lot of time trying to understand if you're a good fit for them. And inversely, you've also been trying to understand if you're a good fit for them as well. And they don't want to lose you. Like they're not going to say no, probably. Don't quote me on this. They're probably not going to say no over like $2,000. But $2,000 is awesome. Like if I could walk away out of that with $2,000 extra dollars, like hell yeah, that'd be great. So I think it really depends, but ultimately you can probably negotiate more than you realize. I would recommend if anyone has better resources on that aren't my personal experience, feel free to show them below. I don't know a ton about WebAssembly, but I do know that it will help, especially for cross-platform things. I am a power engineer learning next, so I can build industry-specific web apps and improve business engineering skills. Do other folks apply web dev skills to their industries? I think that web dev is probably the lowest common denominator to being an engineer. And what I mean by that is most people need a website. Like the internet is this amazing tool that helps not only individuals, but businesses connect all over the world. So even if I'm doing power engineering, which I honestly don't know a lot about, or I'm doing industrial engineering, you probably still need a website somewhere. So learning the fundamentals of the web is a great resource. Not only in business, but with your personal life, it can thrive with improved communication, verbal and written. Absolutely. Hey from Bangladesh. I talk about documenting, but um, it focuses on people mainly with jobs. How about us with jobs at the moment? So, what I would recommend if you don't have an engineering job right now and you're trying to get an engineering job, you want to produce something. Well, let me step back. First, you want to prepare for your interviews, and the most practical advice I can get for preparing for interviews is, um, obviously there'll be some like coding questions in there as well too, but don't neglect the things that seem obvious. Like get a good night of sleep and like make sure you're well rested, make sure you eat, make sure you're not stressed out. Like that goes a long way, like more than you realize. It's just general advice. But then outside of like preparing for interviews or actually like applying to jobs, what I mean by documenting is like when you put that application out there, hello, company X, please hire me. And you have a link to something that when they get, I don't know, when they get attracted by your resume and they want to learn more, they say, okay, let's actually find out more about this person. And they click on the link. And then you have this curated page of information about you with your best content. And the reality is, if you don't have that, they're going to probably Google you anyway to make sure that you're not like, just a mean person in general. So I think it's good to have that, have your curated space of the internet, delete all your old MySpace photos for people who are older, or your old Facebook photos, I guess. I don't know. Your TikToks. What kind of projects would I recommend? I would say do whatever you find enjoyable. For me, I like to do front end stuff. So that's what I enjoy building. And that's what I enjoy doing for like kind of side projects. Yeah, if you have a video or if you have a link on this, leave it as a comment because you can't leave links in the live stream for some reason because Google thinks that you're spamming. But yeah, that would be helpful for sure. Yeah, let's see. Communication. The code is dirtier than an artist's lyrics. Fix it. I don't know that artist, but yeah, having good clear code and good documentation can go a long ways. Feel free to throw out any last questions before I start to wrap things up. The only other thing that I wanted to say, just in general about hiring and promotions and kind of growing at your company, is don't take things too seriously. I think that it can be really easy to get sucked into the, I don't know what you want to call it, the work advice that you see online for people who say, I'm a 50x developer and I made $500,000 a year and I got 8 interviews, like Amazon turned me down and I'm ex Amazon and I'm making like, there's just a lot of crap online. It's easy to get discouraged about people who make more money than you or people who, have grinded more to get a job. What I would say is focus on your own happiness, your own career goals, your own personal life goals. What will help you live a more fulfilled life will help you fulfill your friends and your family and your relationships. And if that means, taking this job over this job or working in a different area, try to refocus that on how it actually matters, to your own life. So that's just some general advice. I'm not trying to get too preachy here, but I think that helps a lot. Is a comp sci major overrated? I don't think so. I think in general, just a degree is good. Like I majored in computer engineering, which I mean, it is relevant, but it talked a lot more about hardware when really I knew that I wanted to do software. So I probably could have done software engineering or I probably could have done computer science, but it didn't really matter that much. Same with like people who do, I don't know, physics or math or management information systems, all these other things. I don't know. It doesn't matter too much, I'd say. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And yeah, I think with that, I will wrap things up here. Thank you to everybody who joined live. I know I kind of just rambled about a bunch of different stuff, but hopefully you found this helpful. Feel free to message me if you have any more questions about growing your tech career. And I hope you have a great weekend or whatever day it is when you're watching the recording for this. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.